If your child with ADHD hasn't had their nutrient levels checked, you might be missing a major root driver of their symptoms. Because ADHD isn't always just about brain chemistry, it's also about whether the brain has the building blocks to make that chemistry work. And this is where a lot of families can get stuck. They're trying strategies, they're trying supplements, sometimes they're trying medication, but no one has ever looked under the hood to see if the brain is simply missing raw materials. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 5 common nutrient deficiencies I find in children with ADHD, why they matter, what they look like in real life, and what to ask your child's clinician about testing. When most people think about ADHD, they think about dopamine. And dopamine is absolutely part of the story. But dopamine doesn't just magically appear. Neurotransmitters are built and regulated using nutrients. And beyond neurotransmitters, nutrients also affect sleep quality, stress resilience, inflammation, and overall brain energy. So if a child is low in a few key nutrients, that can show up as worse focus, more impulsivity, bigger emotions, bedtime struggles, low motivation, or a nervous system that's constantly on edge. And I want to say something important here. This isn't about blame. This isn't about you didn't feed your child well enough. Modern food is convenient. Many children are picky, life is busy, and a lot of these deficiencies happen even in families who are doing a great job. The goal is just to get objective information so we stop guessing, because this is a marathon and not a sprint. And when we support foundations, everything else works better. So let's get into the 5. Number 1 is iron. Most parents only think about iron if their child is anemic, but iron is also closely connected to brain function and dopamine support. And the big one that gets missed is ferritin. Ferritin is iron storage. It's basically the reserve tank. A child can have normal hemoglobin and still have low ferritin, meaning their reserve tank is low. So what does this look like in real life? Sometimes it's obvious fatigue, but often it's subtle. A child who gets mentally tired quickly, lower frustration tolerance, more irritability, restless sleep, or struggling with motivation and follow through. And a pattern I hear all the time is they hold it together at school and then they fall apart at home. Now here's the important safety point. Iron is not a supplement you want to guess on. Too much iron could be harmful. So the move is test first, interpret with your clinician, and then treat appropriately. So what to ask about testing? A CBC, a full iron panel, and ferritin. And if you want to get an even more accurate interpretation, it can also be helpful for your clinician to consider inflammation markers in the bigger picture, because inflammation can change how we interpret iron storage. Number 2 is zinc. Zinc is one of the most common deficiencies I see, especially in children who are picky eaters or who don't eat a lot of protein-rich foods. Zinc matters for brain signaling, and it's strongly tied to attention and impulse control. It also supports immune function, which is why low zinc can show up as frequent colds or slow recovery. So what does low zinc look like? More emotional reactivity, lower frustration tolerance, picky eating or low appetite, sometimes skin issues, sometimes frequent infections. But here's the nuance I want you to know. Zinc and copper have a relationship. If you supplement zinc long-term at higher doses without paying attention, it can lower copper. And copper is also important for brain function, energy production, and nervous system balance. So in my practice, I will often test both zinc and copper, and I'm paying attention to the zinc to copper ratio. In general, I like that ratio to be about 1:1. Not because it has to be perfect, but because I want balance. This is a big reason I'm not a fan of blindly giving zinc, just because a person has ADHD. Zinc can be very helpful when it's truly low, but we want to do it thoughtfully and keep copper in a healthy range as well. So again, test, don't guess. Number 3 is magnesium. If your child is wired at night, struggles to wind down, fights bedtime, or seems restless and revved up, magnesium needs to be on your radar. Magnesium helps to calm the nervous system. It supports sleep quality, it supports muscle relaxation, and it supports stress resilience. When magnesium is low, what I often see is hyperactivity that ramps up in the evening, difficulty settling down, restless sleep, and more anxious energy. Sometimes parents describe it as it's like their body just can't find the brakes. Now, one nuance. basic serum magnesium isn't always the best reflection of magnesium status in the body. RBC, or red blood cell magnesium, is much more accurate. So the type of testing and the interpretation matters. But clinically, magnesium is one of the most important foundational supports for nervous system regulation. And I also want to mention forms for supplementation because this matters. My two favorite forms for most children with ADHD are magnesium glycinate, because it's calming, well absorbed, and generally well tolerated, and also magnesium L-threonate, because it's often used specifically for brain support as it crosses the blood-brain barrier. Now, forms like magnesium citrate or magnesium oxide can be less absorbed, but they do have a place. Citrate especially can be helpful if constipation is part of the picture because it can pull water into the stool. So it's not that citrate or oxide are bad, it's that the best form depends on the goal. If the goal is calm and sleep, I usually start with glycinate or L-threonate. If constipation is a major issue, citrate can be very useful. And number 4 is vitamin D. Vitamin D is not just about bones. It plays a critical role in immune regulation, inflammation balance, and brain health. And specifically, vitamin D plays a role in dopamine function. Vitamin D influences enzymes and pathways involved in neurotransmitter production and brain signaling, which is one reason low vitamin D can overlap with symptoms that look a lot like ADHD struggles. Low energy, low motivation, brain fog, lower mood, less resilience to stress. This is especially common in children who spend a lot of time indoors, live in less sunny climates, or who don't get many vitamin D-rich foods. And this is one of the easiest things to check. Ask your clinician about a 25-hydroxy vitamin D test. Now, supplement-wise, I also want to mention a best practice. When I use vitamin D3, I almost always pair it with vitamin K2. Because vitamin D increases calcium absorption and vitamin K2 helps direct calcium into the right places, like bones and teeth, rather than where you don't want it. So think vitamin D3 and K2 as a more complete approach. And lastly, number 5 is omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s are foundational for brain structure and brain signaling. The brain is literally built out of fat, and omega-3s support healthy cell membranes, which affects how well brain cells communicate. They also help support inflammation balance, and many children with ADHD also have inflammatory drivers like gut issues, food sensitivities, or immune dysregulation. And many children simply don't eat enough fatty fish to get adequate omega-3s. So what can low omega-3 status look like? Sometimes it's dry skin. Sometimes it's mood swings and emotional responses. Sometimes it's learning fatigue, like the brain simply runs out of gas faster. So those are the 5. Iron and ferritin, zinc and copper balance, magnesium, vitamin D, especially vitamin D with K2, and omega-3 fatty acids. Now let's talk about the most important part. You can't reliably guess these. Parents often say, I'm pretty sure my child is low in magnesium, or I think it's iron, or I'm giving them a multivitamin, but guessing can keep you stuck because you might be treating the wrong thing or using the wrong dose, or missing the real deficiency entirely. So here's a simple and practical approach. Talk with your child's clinician about checking these foundations. At a minimum, ask about iron and ferritin, vitamin D, and then zinc, copper, and magnesium based on symptoms and diet. For omega-3s, some clinicians use an omega-3 index or fatty acid profile. Not always necessary, but very helpful if you want to remove the guesswork. And if you do find deficiencies, treat them thoughtfully. Food first when possible, targeted supplementation when appropriate, and then reassess. Because when we correct deficiencies, parents often see meaningful shifts. Sleep improves, emotional regulation improves, and then focus becomes easier because you supported what the brain actually needed. If your child hasn't had these levels checked, this is one of the smartest places to start. And if you're interested in testing your levels and working with me one-on-one to manage your or your child's ADHD naturally, click the link in the description to set up a discovery call.